Water is a conduit. And so what I mean by that is when you speak words into your water and then you drink it, you are literally drinking what you've communicated.
Welcome to Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast, the space where healing, hope, and real talk come together. Today's episode invites you to shift from surviving to restoring. We're joined by Talisa Martin, licensed social worker, healing-centered leadership coach, and creator of the R.O.O.T.E.D framework. With nearly 20 years of experience guiding individuals and organizations through trauma, transition, and transformation, Talisa brings a powerful perspective shaped by both professional expertise and profound personal loss. In this conversation, we explore how earth, water, air, fire, and ether, the five natural elements, can become intentional tools for caregivers to ground themselves, restore balance, and nurture mental wellness throughout their caregiving journey. If you're feeling burned out, disconnected, or simply ready to reclaim your peace, this is the episode you didn't know you needed. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone, to Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast. Today, we have a great guest with us. I'm so excited to have her on. We have Talisa Martin. Talisa, thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest on Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and I'm really excited to be with you today. So thank you for having me. And hello to the audience.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for coming on. So, podcast family, today's episode, the title is The 5 Elements Every Caregiver Should Use to Reclaim Peace and Balance. This is sincerely going to be a great conversation that also involves spirituality. So, with that said, let's get right on into it. Talisa, please tell me about yourself.
My name is Talisa Martin. I am a licensed social worker. I'm also an author and a healing-centered leadership coach. I support individuals to meet their goals while honoring and reclaiming their right to wellness. I really got into this work because of my own childhood experiences and observing how my path took me in one direction while some of my loved ones, their paths ended up in a different direction, by no means of our own character, but by the supports and the resources that we had. And along the way, I also discovered some of my own gifts. So I've always had very lucid dreams and I've received prophetic messages. And I didn't really notice what they were until like my mid 20s. Starting in 2022, one of my staff members actually passed away. But prior to his death, I was able to experience that things were not going to end well. And then a month later, my sister died, my older sister died. And I actually had a dream of her death the day that she passed away. And so beginning in 2022, I had a series of experiences like this, which I had not had previously, even though I had this gift. I had started to be able to see folks pretty much die before it happened. And so that was a very spiritually traumatic experience, an emotionally traumatic experience, and also a cognitively traumatic experience. And so in 2023, I ended up with a therapist and I also found myself a spiritual coach. And so I was able to process not just those 2 deaths, but the dozen deaths that followed between 2022 and 2025. So in 2025, my aunt died in April. And so this experience has been consistent for 3 years. And I had to figure out, how do I heal myself and continue to operate and function in the world as a leader, as a woman, as someone who cares about the community and people.
Wow, that's deep. So, thinking about just everything that you said about the loss that you were experiencing, many different losses, the lucid dreaming, coming to the revelation that various loved ones were going to pass. What was your first experience like with that when it happened?
Mm-hmm. So the very first, I was in my 20s and I felt that a man in my family that he was very sick. And so in your 20s, you don't really know much about the world. You think you do, but you don't. And so at that time, I started making phone calls. I was calling all the male family members to say, are you okay? Are you well? What's going on? And then a week later, my cousin actually died from his battle with diabetes. And so that was the very first time. And at first, initially, I was just like, oh, wow, that's a coincidence. But beginning in 2022, I really recognized that this was something more traumatizing and painful. And so there were times when I would be crying for absolutely no reason. And I would feel death. I would just say, I'm feeling death and I'm not sure why. And then later on, I would hear the story of someone who passed away. And so I would say it was scary. It created a level of social anxiety in me, but I was still required to go out into the world. And so depression, social anxiety, all of those things were my experience for about 2 years.
Wow. So, how did you begin to heal yourself?
As a clinician, I had tools that I could refer back to, right? So I knew that getting into the sunlight was important. I knew getting outside was important. I tried to exercise, but I wasn't motivated to exercise. And so what I started to do was to utilize my affirmations. And those things would be great, right? I would say, you know what, this is a moment. I'm grateful for my gifts. I'm grateful for the love that I had in the relationship that I had with these individuals who've passed. And what I found is that on some days it worked, and then on other days it did not work. And it was very difficult to handle. So, getting with my therapist, I had to allow myself a space to grieve because when you're on the move, you don't find time to grieve and to take care of yourself. So, I had to first find the space where I could be comfortable just being vulnerable and letting go of everything that I was carrying. So, I would say that's the first thing that I had to do. And going outside, being with the air, being with the earth, those things were very supportive. But I did not have a system when I started going through my process. And so it wasn't until I really formalized my process of my affirmations, my mirror talk, looking in the mirror and really saying, girl, you got this. You're going to make it through this. And there is like your highest self, you're still in there and she's going to come back to surface. So it really took me systematizing all of those strategies to help me come back on top.
That's awesome that you said that. Something else that you said that really resonated with me is that you had a therapist and a spiritual coach.
I
So,
did.
yes. So let's talk about the difference between those two and how each one was able to help you out.
So, when you're looking for a therapist, I knew when I was looking for a therapist, it had to be someone who understood spirituality. Because if you do not understand my gifts and if you do not understand what it means to have a relationship with the ancestors and everything that is beyond the material and what we can physically see, you will not be able to understand my journey. And so, when I first met my therapist, that was my first conversation. She said, "What's your presenting problems?" I told her it's hard for me to get out of bed. I don't have space to feel my emotions. I don't feel like myself. And I need to work through this. And I told her my story. And then I said, but you have to also understand spirituality. And what she said at the time was that she understands spirituality, but she doesn't have my gifts. And so she promised to honor who I am and what I bring to the table, and to be honest when she did not understand things. So she would clearly ask me for clarification on what my spirituality meant to her. Along the way, I was also working with an executive coach. And I had to pause my coaching sessions and just say, look, I'm not ready for this right now. This is my experience. And that individual had someone who had a similar gift as mine, and she made that referral. So, getting with my spiritual coach, she was able to talk to me about how to really understand the messages that I was getting, the downloads that I was receiving, how to give permission to those downloads, and then also how to quiet those downloads. And that was very different. So we engaged in meditation, we engaged in conversations about our spirituality and various practices. And so that was very connected to like my ancestors. It was very connected to my spirit guides. It was a very different conversation where I could start to have more ownership of my gifts, whereas my therapist was helping me process the depression, the social anxiety, and things like that.
So, those two components together, therapy and a spiritual coach, helped you with your next step, right?
Yes,
So,
they
that's
did.
I definitely want to dig into this because
Okay.
podcast family was really exciting is that Tashia, in addition to undergoing therapy and going through her journey with the spiritual coach, she's actually a coach as well. She is a healing centered leadership coach. With that said, she was able to take everything that she went through in terms of the loss and the heartache and the foresight, spiritually speaking, of knowing when something was going to happen and she was able to cultivate it in such a way that she has been able to help others. So, with that said, she has a book out, and it's called New Leaf, Reflecting on Life's Transitions. And I like to talk about that.
Right. So I have New Leaf Reflecting on Life's Transitions. And New Leaf is a 52-week guided journal which supports individuals to reclaim their wellness, process the transition, to prepare and to walk through and work through the transition that they're going through or that they've identified. But then it also has a component of honoring the ancestors. And so New Leaf goes through the awakening stage because we're all in a space of transition, but sometimes our transitions can feel heavier than others because there's a component of loss sometimes when we're grieving the difference in the relationships and what we thought our life would be. And so there's this aspect of the work where you have to first identify and connect with what is it that's changing in my life and where do I want to go. And so we start there with awakening ourselves to the moment. And then we go through the five elements. So we have earth, where this is the space where you reconnect with your body and recognize that you are safe where you are. There are various techniques such as grounding techniques. So there's progressive muscle relaxation, which is a very trauma informed technique, which is in the book. And it helps individuals to bring yourself out of your mind that might be wandering about everything that's going on. If you're worrying about the death of your loved one, how are you going to manage the challenges of tomorrow? There's different strategies that help you connect with your body and the earth elements. There's also journal prompts that help you to process what is it that you need in order to feel safe? Who are your support systems? What are some strategies and techniques that you can use? And then there's also a set of affirmations that connect you to being grounded. So from there, we go into the water element because the water element is connected to our emotions. And so this is the space where we start to really flush the feelings that may be holding us back, where we start to unpack and pay attention to the things that are holding us back. And we start to free ourselves emotionally and to honor what we're feeling. From there, we get into the air element, which we process our thoughts. And a lot of times we just move throughout the day without processing how our thoughts are impacting our behavior, are impacting our emotions. And sometimes we can be in a really amazing space feeling great, but then we have one thought that triggers us and takes us back into the pain. And so the air element allows us to process those thoughts and make sure that we're in alignment with where we're trying to go before we jump into the fire element, which is a space of action. And then uniquely about this book, you also have the ether element, which is eternity, it's eternal. And that's where we really recognize our connection to our ancestors who recently passed, to recognize that they're still with us. We can still honor them. We can still revere them. We can wear some of their favorite things, prepare some of their favorite foods, and we can even wash our hands and release the guilt that we may be feeling about our grief process. And so the book takes you through those different chapters over 52 weeks. And then for the final and closing chapter, you're really trying to stamp what it is that you want to see continued in your life.
So, thinking about being a caregiver, podcast
Mhm.
family, being a caregiver, whether you're a caregiver to neurodivergent child or children, whether you're taking care of a parent or a partner, a loved one, usually speaking, as caregivers, we take on a lot. We do. So, how can you move forward and still make time for yourself and still receive all of the healing that you need during this time in your life? Tashia, thinking about that as a caregiver and the five elements, what would be some recommendations from each element?
So I think that the first thing we have to do is reclaim our right to wellness, especially a lot of caregivers are women. A lot of caregivers are women of color, but we're not the only caregivers. It's important that we first establish our right to wellness. And so that's where you want to start first, is releasing the thought and the idea that you have to do everything for everyone else and neglect yourself. And so that's the first step, is getting in the mindset of I have a right to feel well. And then from there, you're looking at your systems that are in place. What systems do you have to really care for yourself? What does your sleep look like? What does your waking look like? What does it look like when you take a shower? And so this is where the water element comes in. Water is a conduit. And so what I mean by that is when you speak words into your water and then you drink it, you are literally drinking what you've communicated. And water can energetically and scientifically change based on what's around it. And so, one strategy that I love to share with people is that when you are in the shower, when you're taking your shower in the morning, as you're washing over each component of your body, you're speaking, you're verbalizing what you want to honor about yourself. And so, if your mind got you through the day, as you wash your face, I'm so grateful for my brain, for my mind to really help me function and process all the things that I'm dealing with. As you are washing your arms, your armpits, and we open up our arms, you are expressing gratitude for your ability to love and for your ability and willingness to receive love. As you go every single part of your body, when you wash your legs and your feet, you are expressing gratitude for them holding you up every single day and every single moment, and for walking you in the right path, and for helping you navigate when you seem to get off course. And so that's something that you can do first thing in the morning. And then as you go throughout your day, things can be stressful and hectic. When you return home, you are washing off the stress and you're going to verbalize, I remove the pain and sadness from my heart, but I am grateful for the connection and the relationship that I got to experience today with my loved one. And so sometimes we're planning for their transition. And so we're grieving along the way through that process. And so you want to be able to just speak a level of gratitude for the relationship in those moments. And so I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can do, but we have to verbalize it. We can't keep it inside. We have to allow the words to come from our heart and out of our mouth into the universe. And taking that shower is extremely important.
I love that you said that. I love that you said that. You are the first guest that I've had on my podcast that has spoken about water and how
Mhm.
powerful it is. Podcast family, I did some research on water. I'm just one of those people. I've always just been curious about just everything around me. So I've done research on water, and that's when I ran into the Nobel Peace Prize winner that did a documentary on water. I didn't know prior that water is alive and that we can affect the water just by speaking to it. It's
Yes.
a living organism. And then when we drink it, think about it. Our bodies are made up of what, about 75% water? And if
Mhm.
we drink this water, the water is powerful. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. Thinking about that and understanding it's okay for you to take a moment for yourself. And as a caregiver, I know that everything can be extremely busy. We as caregivers, you wear many hats. A lot of people still work, they still have other obligations, and then they're also taking care of their loved one. With that said, is how do I make time for myself? I don't have time for myself. Well, guess what? You take a shower, right? Hopefully you do. Okay. Amen. Hopefully you do. And so when you get into the shower or you take a bath, you can use that time, as I said, to honor yourself and to help change your mindset. And then incorporating the fact that water is alive by you speaking, not holding it in internally, but by you speaking a level of gratitude, this is something that can help you out greatly. And this is something that's easy to incorporate throughout your day because you have to bathe. So you can use that time productively versus using that time perhaps to think about 101 things that's on your to do list or being stressed out about your current situation.
And sometimes you have to cry through it. One of the hardest things that I had to experience was dissociation. And that is this feeling of I can literally look at myself in the mirror, but I don't know who I'm looking at because I was under so much stress. And I just imagine that when we're caring for our loved ones, sometimes we lose ourselves. We don't know where we are. And that can be scary. It can be very sad and heartbreaking as well. So we can feel like we're losing some of ourselves. And so being able to look in the mirror talk is another strategy that I like to use. And what you said is that the power of the tongue, life and death exists in the power of the tongue, which is our words, which is the air element. And so looking in the mirror, looking directly into your eyes and affirming who you are, even if you don't see that person in that moment, going deep to say, I know you are someone who loves big. I know that you are someone who has joy. I know that this is who you are. I know that I am also supported by my ancestors. right? I am not doing this alone. A lot of times we feel like we're going through this process and journey alone and we don't talk about it. But sometimes we have to talk to ourselves by looking in the mirror into our eyes. And I've done that plenty of times and I have been in tears bawling, like, please hear me, girl, hear me, right? Because I need the me inside that I used to know, I need her to hear it so she can come back to the surface. And so the power of our words, what you said is so important. And there's also another strategy called word fasting or talk fast, where you just remain silent. Because even in our speaking and our communication, we are exerting energy that we could potentially be saving. Sometimes we're spending time giving advice and sharing information, and it takes more energy than we really have to give. And sometimes people don't listen to our guidance and advice. So I had to learn to just stop talking sometimes. And that's important too, because you're also sparing your own energy. The fire was a challenging piece for me to get into because I did not want to move. I wasn't really motivated. So I had to go through these other processes of my mirror talk with my affirmations. But then, even getting into body movement, I found that being able to just jump would release energy or anxiety that was inside of me. So that was sometimes the only fire activity that I can do was bounce. Another thing I would like to do is like a butterfly hug and rocking myself back and forth. If you're in the South and you see all the rocking chairs on the porches and you notice your aunties and your grandmamas sitting out there, that is one of the most soothing things you can do. So sometimes you could just hug yourself and you rock, right? So I like to do that as well and to symbolically brush away anything that is weighing me down and release it from myself. And I will verbalize again, this is not mine. It has no point or it has no purpose here. And I release it. So with that movement, we can start to feel some difference in our experience.
I would imagine that it also includes being able to catch yourself when you have those negative thoughts that may come. Being
Absolutely.
able to call that out. Let's
Mhm.
talk about that.
So I read a book called The Big Leap. And in that book, the author talks about this idea that when things go well, we sometimes are so used to them not being well that we automatically find something that's wrong. So if you're ever like in a relationship and you're like, oh, you know what, we are getting along just fine, then all of a sudden you're in an argument, wonder why did you potentially initiate that argument? Why did you bring yourself back to the place that did not feel well? And so what you're naming about catching yourself is extremely important because you can be making progress in a very positive way. But if your thoughts remain able to go back into the negative and you allow that to happen, you can easily sink back. And so it's important to do that. One thing I like to do in order to stay positive is to keep a gratitude jar. And so at the end of the day, even if there was just one thing that went well, I'll write down this is the one thing that went well and I'll put it in the jar. And I collect those words, those messages for an entire 30 days. And then I'll go back into the jar and pull it out and notice, wow, life is tough, but there's also some beauty that exists in here at this moment.
The podcast family, again, that's another great tip. You could get a glass or a jar and along your caregiving journey, because I know this can be very challenging. It can be
Mhm.
tough, but thinking about things that went well, things that you're grateful for, write it out and put it in a jar so then at the end of the week you can review those things. That's something that can help.
Yeah.
Your book is like number one on Amazon, isn't it?
Yes, it debuted in a number of number one spots for depression and mental health. It also debuted for alternative medicine as well as business, stress, and health. And so it's been on the charts. It's supported a number of individuals. I've had testimonies, I've had people reach out to me and just express how much it's helped them. And that's beautiful because I actually use my journal myself. So it's one thing to write it, it's another thing to go back and sit with it. And so I'll find myself snuggled up on, I have a big cushion I like to sit on. I'll snuggle up with the cushion. I'll light candles. I'll invite my ancestors who I've lost to join me as I engage in the process and in my practice. Because what I didn't share is that I did not get the divine message to write this book until 2 days after my uncle passed away. And so this book started following the death of my uncle. He lived in Florida, I'm in New Jersey. And I remember wondering, would he make it through the night? Would he make it through the week? And so I flew down, I rushed down to see him and be by his side. And I landed probably 10 p.m. and he died overnight in the hospital. So I did not get to say goodbye in person in that moment. But what I was moved to do before I left to visit him was I brought a few tools. I brought an image of his mother, my grandmother, who passed away when I was 3. I brought an image of my father, his brother, who passed away when I was 17. And what I did was I laid those pictures next to him and I said a prayer over his body. And I asked my ancestors, his mother and brother, to support in his transition over. And so when I sit with my book, I'm honoring them. And so when I came back to New Jersey 2 days later, I got the message, Sishi, you need to write a book. And I was so confused because I never intended to be an author. I like to support with providing clinical support and coaching to individuals, but I never thought to write a book for individuals. And so to be able to pour this out into pages has been therapeutic for one, but it's a continued gift to myself and to others because I literally sit with it and do the practices myself.
Podcast family, did you hear that? That's so deep. I love the fact, Tashia, that your book debuted at #1 in various categories because, again, as a caregiver, as a woman, we wear many hats. We do. So, guess what? We're in that management role. We're working for that corporation. We still may have children, whether small or grown. And we're still the ones that also take care of our loved ones. Wearing all of those hats, and even during the time that we're being caregivers, having to be strong, we need an outlet. You need to be able to express how you're feeling. You need to be able to release anything that's negative or heavy that's on you. You also, in terms of community, of course, you need that, but is what can we do in terms of self care that will help? And your book, I believe, does an excellent job at highlighting that and also giving a lot of food for thought. Because even during this conversation, you've blessed us, blessed the podcast family with dynamic information and tips that they can easily incorporate into their lives. So that's awesome. Um, your rooted framework, let's talk about that.
So the rooted framework also begins with reclaiming your wellness. And so that looks like establishing your self care process and your strategies, which you can find in the New Leaf book, but then also observing the systems to make sure that your systems honor what you're trying to do with your wellness and that they also honor your goal and your mission. From there, you are going to go into owning your gifts because I believe that every single individual was put on this earth, was born with a unique gift that no one else has. And sometimes we are encouraged to fit in to a point that we forget what our own specialties are. And so when we do that, we lose what we have to offer. But when we own that, we can start to say, this is my offering, and I can see myself and I work more easily in this gifting than me trying to operate in someone else's gifting. We can't do that. So you get to a point where everyone's owning their gifts, you're acknowledging what our strengths and our talents are. And then you want to go into a space of tending to the collective. And so that means that we all see one another's gifts. I know that these are your talents, these are my talents. And because of that, we can tap on each other. We start to build that community because we know where to go for help. And then from there, we get into evidence and beyond. So, evidence a lot of times is our data, is that quantitative data. We want to see movement in numbers, we want to see things change. But when we're making decisions, we can't just rely on the numbers that are in front of us. We also have to rely on our intuition. And that's where the beyond comes from. That is where the wisdom is, that is where the intuition is. And so we have to pay attention to that as well. Then we get into our D, which is designing for sustainability. So we've gone through this entire process. We know what's working, we know what's not working. We're asking ourselves a series of questions, but how do we really make sure that this sticks? And so with the designing for transformation and sustainability, you're really focused on doing the things that make it stick.
I love the fact that you were able to incorporate the rooted framework within the New Leaf reflections on life transitions. How do those two work together?
So when you're in the space of reclaiming your wellness, you may be someone who feels entirely safe and grounded, right? or you may be someone whose thoughts are together. So you may not need to start with one particular element, but you choose the element that is your area of need. And so for me, I would potentially start with earth because I want to feel grounded in everything. I'm a thinker. My brain is always operating. So I need to ground. I need to get back to a space of safety and out of the air. And so that might be my starting point. Whereas you may be someone who's, I need to get into action and fire, right? I spend a lot of time in thought, but I need to get into action and fire. And so you would start by reclaiming your wellness by creating those systems within that particular area. And also, I like to use this with like teachers and educators as well to say, you're the leader of that classroom, but now what are the wellness points for your students? What are the talents of your students? And so you can do this in regardless of what industry you're in, because every individual has a talent, but every individual also has a starting point where they need to feel well. And so you want to first honor that, put together the plan.
I love the fact that you said with your book, you don't have to start at the very beginning. You can
Mm-hmm.
actually start wherever you feel that you're ready to start at. So, whether it's grounding, whether it's earth, whether it's water, whether it's air, whether it's fire, podcast family, you'll have the ability to choose exactly where you want to start. And then you can go back. So, if you started with, let's say you started with air, and you wanted to go back to earth, you could do it like that. Or if you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to start with earth and then go to fire, you can also do that as well. Is that correct?
It is correct. And you can, there's also another starting point. Typically, people will go earth through, or they'll start by jumping into ether because that is specific about grief and transitions with a loved one. Another strategy, if you are not ready to write, if you're not ready to start in any of those spaces, but you want techniques, there's also a glossary of techniques at the back of the book with different steps and strategies. So I really tried to prepare this for the folks who are ready to sit, for the folks who are on the move and are not ready to sit, but I really wanted to be versatile so that anyone can tap into their area of need at any time.
I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. Because podcast family, there are several ways in which you could get started with this book. You can read it from front to cover. You can start where you feel you need to start, or you can even go to
Yeah.
the back and look at different strategies and take it from there to determine how you want to work through this book. Again, I absolutely love it because something that Tashia said that resonated with me is that she just didn't write this to write it, to get it out. She didn't just write this because she likes writing. She wrote this because this helped her. She took her knowledge that she obtained throughout her experience and she put it down on paper so that she could share it with others. And in addition to that, this is also something that she continues to incorporate in her life. So if she's incorporating it in her life, that means that it's working well for her. And if it's working well for her, then I'm sure it's going to work well for you. And being a caregiver, we need it. So, making time for yourself is so incredibly important. I've been talking about that this whole season, the importance of it, because you need to make sure that you're full and you're in a good place, that your cup runneth over, so that you can be there for others the best way that you know how to be. Because it is a very challenging road that we're on, but it's one where you're going to be well supported, especially if you incorporate the different tools I have been providing you by having such dynamic guests such as Tashia Martin. Now, your book can be found on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
Podcast family, I'm going to make sure that the link is provided in the description of this podcast. So wherever you listen to this podcast at, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify, Amazon, Audible, Amazon Music rather, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to it in the description, I'm going to make sure that you have that link you can access to purchase Tashia's book. All right, so changing gears a bit, I would like to get into your coaching aspect, understanding that you are a healing centered leadership coach. Please tell us about that.
As a healing centered leadership coach, we are looking at a number of things. What makes this unique is that we want to create the systems that allow the people in your organization to be well as they are producing, right? And this type of leadership ensures that we are honoring the people and that our systems and our policies also honor the people who are doing the work. And so, what it would look like is I would come in and work with whomever the point of contact is to identify what is the goal, what is the mission, what are we really trying to do. Let's look at your turnover rates. Let's look at burnout. What does that look like? What's happening with your staff surveys? What are people saying is working well? What are they saying are there stress points? Because what we know is that people are leaving the workforce. I know that people have been losing their jobs due to layoffs, but prior to layoffs, people have been exiting the workforce because of burnout. And so, how do we start to improve our systems so that we're honoring it? So, what we'll do is we'll look at what are some of your staff saying, what has been your observation, what's your experience, and then we'll start to conduct some assessment. We'll do some walkthroughs together. We'll start to do potentially some talks and try to understand what do our policies and practices actually do, because sometimes we think it's one thing, but in reality people are experiencing something totally different and something that does not feel good. And so we'll get into our systems. That's when we look at our systems, our processes, our practices to see if they're really doing the right thing by the people. And then once you get into the space of owning the gifts, we want to look to see, do we have the right people in the right places? Sometimes we have amazing individuals in our organization, but they're not doing the right job. And when folks are not doing the right job, it can take them a lot longer to accomplish the task and get to the goal, or they can be dissatisfied. And now you're losing great talent because they're unhappy. And so we start to look at all of these things. We start to see what questions should you be asking yourself as a leader in order to make these decisions. And you're also reflecting on your own leadership style. So I like to use different personality types and understanding personality types, such as like Myers-Briggs. What are some of the things that you're great at? What are some of the things that you would prefer not to do so that we can get folks to do the right jobs in the organization? And so we constantly go through this process. I would come into your site, or we can have virtual coaching to really process what's been going on, to see what shifts need to be made, but it's really tailored to the needs of the organization. And we'll also put together some systems and some walking tools so that once our partnership concludes, you have these tools that you can continue to reflect and assess your organization and evaluate the progress and where you're trying to go. That's pretty much what our process is. And I pretty much work with folks for 10 months. It can be a short period of time. It could be a longer period of time. It can be multiple years, but it really depends on what your goals are. And so I am currently accepting new clients if folks wanted to get in contact with me to do this type of work.
Oh, I love that. So again, podcast family, this is another added bonus to having a Miss Tashia Martin on, because as stated, she is an author, she's a social worker, and she's also a healing centered leadership coach. And understanding as caregivers that we do wear multiple hats as well, this could also be an opportunity for you to connect with Tashia professionally. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yes, no problem. And if folks wanted to reach out to me, they can email me at connect@restoringlegacy.org. So all my emails can go there and we can set up a consultation.
Yes. And podcast family, again, I will make sure that information is available to you. It will be located in the description of this episode. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tashia, for coming on again and just sharing the wealth of knowledge that you have with Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast family. We sincerely appreciate it. I've learned a lot tonight, so thank you.
Thank you for having me. And podcast family, Mama Mabel's team, you all are doing amazing work, and everyone is really blessed to have you in their lives. So honor yourself as you're honoring others, and I honor you as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Until next time, podcast fam.